Donald Trump gave an interview to a right-wing leaning Israeli news outlet. He was at Mar-a-Lago. Let's take a listen to a little bit of what he had to say, and then we'll read you some of the additional quotes that weren't included in the video portion. Take a listen.
They would have never done that because they knew there would have been very big consequences. All right. That being said, you have to finish up your war. You have to finish it up. You got to get it done. And I'm sure you'll do that. And we got to get to peace. You can't have this going on. And I will say, Israel has to be very careful because you're losing a lot of the world. You're losing a lot of support. But you have to finish up. You have to get the job done. And you have to get on to peace. You have to get on to a normal life for Israel and for everybody else. They say if I ran for office in Israel, I'd get 98% of the vote. I'm not Jewish, and yet Israel to me is very important. That's why I did Golan Heights. Golan Heights is worth trillions of dollars.
Okay. He goes on, by the way, to say...
What is he talking about with the Golan Heights?
I don't even know. But he goes on to say, like, I asked my ambassador, give me a history lesson. Make it 5 minutes or less, he said. And then based on that 5-minute conversation, he did whatever this thing is with the Golan Heights that he did.
He recognized the Golan Heights.
Okay.
Got that.
Yeah.
But of course, in his way, he's like, it's worth trillions of dollars. It has nothing to do, it has to do with the real estate value of the land.
Very much echoes Kushner's comments, right? About how Gaza, look at this amazing waterfront property for development. Isn't this fantastic? Like, the way these people think is really something else. Obviously, people picked up on the fact that he says here, multiple times, he said this throughout the interview, you have to finish up, you have to get the job done, and you have to get to peace. So he'll say things like that. Then he'll also say things that are just wholly like, oh, of course, I'll be great for it. I'll give you everything that you want. And we know from the last time that he was in office, he did exactly that. He did give them everything that they wanted, everything that they asked for. The Abraham Accords, were part of the context that Hamas says was what motivated them to commit their atrocities and attacks on October 7th. That is not to justify Hamas actions. That's just to explain to you the way that they were thinking about this and how they felt that their back was up against the wall because this normalization of relations was happening that made them feel like the whole world is moving on and they're forgetting about us and we're losing any sort of window to do anything at all. So Trump, says his typical thing about, oh, this never would have happened under me, blah, blah, blah. I think that's nonsense. First of all, you can't prove a counterfactual, but second of all, his administration was a key part of creating this context, and that was continued by the Biden administration. They were pushing for normalization with Saudi Arabia, so both of these administrations and many more besides complicit in creating the context for October 7th.
Yeah, the thing is about Trump, though, is he can't help but strike to at least some directional truth, and that's what I really found in some of these comments. Let's put it up there on the screen. Of course, the Israeli outlet didn't cut the video of this, but we do have the text. Quote, if you were president, how would you counter the wave of anti-Semitism in the wake of war's outbreaks? He says, well, that's because you fought back. And I think Israel made a very big mistake. I wanted to call and say, don't do it. These photos and shots, moving shots of bombs being dropped into buildings in Gaza. And I said, oh, that's a terrible portrait. It's a very bad picture for the world. The world is seeing this every night. I would watch buildings pour down on people. I would say it was given by the defense ministry and said whoever's providing that is a bad image. And the Israeli newscaster says, but terrorists are hiding in those buildings. He says, go and do what you have to do, but you don't do that. And I think that's one of the reasons there has been a lot of kickback. If people didn't see that every single night, I've watched every single one of those, and I think Israel wanted to show it's tough. But sometimes you shouldn't be doing that. So
go and do what you have to do, but you don't do that.
This is the most revealing. Look, this is always my big defense of Trump. He at least can smell where things are in the media. And he has an uncanny ability through his PR perception of the world to be like, look, on a policy level, I support you guys. He's like, but don't do that. Maybe, in his own very Trumpian way, but do what you'd have to do, but don't do that. I thought about calling him, say, don't do it. It's a very bad picture to the world. This is the savant-ish aspect of Trump's character where you can't see any other Republican ever saying anything like that because they have to stay within a consistent prism. But for him, he's like, I can see that this is going to be a real problem for me. So it's not that politically he's positioning himself differently, but he's almost offering messaging advice. I would also say, he said, what did he say? I think they've made a big mistake. They shouldn't do it. It's like people were like, oh my gosh, is Trump calling for an unconditional ceasefire without the release of hostages in Israel? That's certainly one way you could actually read it, which is the hilarious thing about him and the way that he can put himself.
That is part of Trump, and what is like, you know, incredible and maddening about him is you could read into these comments basically anything that you want. Because the comment of like, oh, you have to finish the job. I mean, that sounds really horrifying. But then he's like, you have to get to peace.
Right.
The piece that this right-wing outlet picked up on was like, you'd be crazy not to do what Israel did after October 7th.
That's not
and
the
that's
headline.
What they use for their headline. Because that's what fits what they wanted to hear from this conversation. There was another piece that I wanted to read you, and he does throughout this whole interview, which I encourage you to read because it is interesting. He keeps coming back to, you know, the assault on Gaza and the buildings pouring down on people, as he said, is like a PR problem for Israel. You heard him say, like, you're losing all this support around the world. You know, you shouldn't do that, et cetera, et cetera. He keeps coming back to it as like a messaging and PR problem, not like a reality problem for Israel. But he got asked about the Chuck Schumer comments calling for a new government to be elected after the war is over. And let me read you this, because he gets into the Israel lobby. And it's, again, one of these things that, like, you can't imagine really any other Republican politician exactly saying these particular things. So he says, I think it's a terrible thing to do with regard to Schumer because it takes all of your momentum away because they watch the government, they watch the people, what's going on. It shows great division in the United States. You have to have support. And you don't have the support you used to have. Some 15 years ago, Israel had the strongest lobby. If you were a politician, you couldn't say anything bad about Israel. That would be like the end of your political career. Today, it's almost the opposite. Not true, but anyway, put that aside. I've never seen. You have AOC +3. These lunatics, frankly, he goes on to like rant and rave about AOC and Rashida Tlaib. Then he goes on to say, and 15 years ago, that would have been unthinkable to be doing that. So Israel has to get better with the promotional and with the public relations because right now they're in ruin. They're being hurt very badly, I think, in a public relations sense. So anyway, some opinions offered there about the importance and strength of the Israel lobby from Mr. Trump.
He knows, right? This is what I mean about him.
Well, and that's the thing, is he just is looking out for, I don't think Trump is ideological about Israel. I think it's purely transactional, right? You know, he got a lot of money from Sheldon Adelson last time around. There are other influential donors for whom this is a really key issue. He sees where the Republican Party is, and it's like, all right, well, this is just where I'm going to be. But to your point, there's, I think, two other pieces going on. First of all, he has a personal grievance with Netanyahu because he accepted the legitimacy of Joe Biden's election.
And was one of the first, that's right. Yeah.
So he has a personal grievance with Netanyahu. And second of all, I think you're right that he sniffs out, you know, that Joe Biden has a real problem on this issue with regard to his base. So he feels like if I can even gesture at like, we need to end this, this is too much, there needs to be a piece that can help to drive that divide in the Democratic Party. But, you know, I mean, I also think even as these comments were all over the map, and like I said, I think you can kind of take from them whatever you want. To the extent that Netanyahu was thinking, you know, I just need to keep this going and Donald Trump's going to get elected and he's just going to let me do whatever I want, you have to at least call into question whether that would actually be the case based on these comments that
Trump
he made
has no loyalty, he has no ideology. This was a major problem during the administration. We never knew what we were going to get. On the one hand, we're pulling out Afghanistan. The other hand, we're hiring John Bolton. So which is it?
Right.
You know, so we never really know. In general, he didn't care about policy. But what he does care about is a bad headline. And there are several moments I'll never really forget from interviewing and meeting Trump. But I can't go into too much detail, but there was one instance where we were insinuating something that would have caused him a bad headline. And he freaked out at a personal level that I had never ever seen him react before. And it was really in some of those moments, kind of covering him up close, that you could just see, like, this is what makes him tick. And so to the extent that he's quote unquote loyal to Israel, it's like, yeah, maybe from a campaign perspective, but if he gets into office and you're Bibi and you said the wrong thing about Biden, or if he can sense that this is going to be bad for him politically, he's going to cut you loose no matter what. And that's why I think you are correct. I mean, the Trump is simply the master of saying everything to everyone. It's part of the reason why he is as successful as he is. That's why people often articulate his meandering, rhetoric that is all over the place. But I've often found it's actually a major strength for him, because his supporters can be like, no, he's the candidate of peace, or he's the candidate of strength. Neocons and, isolationists alike can find whatever they want in some of his rhetoric. And I think that's how he's going to continue on this issue. He'll never come down as stridently as a Tom Cotton or any of these other folks, because he doesn't believe it. He really doesn't.
Well, and in that way, I mean, Biden is deeply ideological.
Yeah, he is very
issue.
ideological.
I think that he is locked in ideological pro-Israel Zionist on this issue, which is why he's been willing to, he's risking his entire reelect over this issue. If you just look at the numbers, how important this has become for young voters, for Arab Americans, for Muslim Americans, for Black Americans. I mean, there is the core of the Democratic base is there is a significant portion that is deeply distraught over what is happening and what this president is not just sitting back and watching happen, but is shipping the weapons for and supporting diplomatically and, enabling in every way that he possibly can. So he is actually willing to risk Trump getting reelected for his ideological zeal and commitment on the issue. Trump is just purely transactional. Now, within the Republican Party context, it has always been the case. I shouldn't say always, because actually if you go back to George H.W. Bush and Reagan, they were definitely better on this issue than Joe Biden and willing to stand up to Israel in certain instances. But in the modern Republican Party context, that transactional math has always landed you on the side of, let me just do, whatever Israel wants, let me back them at every turn, et cetera. I don't really expect that to be different. But, it's classic Trump just to embody the way that he can say two things basically at once. He says, go and do what you have to do, but you don't do that. So which is it? Do you do what you have to do from their perspective, or do you not do that? And again, you can kind of read into that whatever you want to read into that. I actually, when I read that, I just burst out laughing because it is so classic Trump. It's like Trump AI. If you asked a Trump AI to respond to this question, that's what they'd say.
I just realized Trump AI is almost literally impossible because he's so all over the map. You could never program that level of randomness into Trump's speech. Trump is always going to have a job, and he's also really old, so he probably won't live to see it.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.